Parents with nanny cams, what have you caught your babysitter doing? Story 1. This was my equivalent of pre-K. All the kids were regressing in their movement ability and getting really fat, so they set up spy equipment. Turns out one carer was doubling every baby's food portions and forcefully overfeeding them. Story 2. Wish I had a nanny cam. My stepsister was watching my brother with disabilities for me. She would dump out the contents of his capsule meds and use them later. Didn't find out about it until he started having seizures constantly and ended up in the hospital for the second time. Story 3. This isn't a bad one. My parents caught the babysitter carrying our 60-pound golden retriever like he was a baby. We also caught our maintenance guy spooning with our 130-pound mastiff on the floor. We encourage their love best as we can now. Story 4. I've been a pretty regular weekend nanny for an amazing family for 4 years now. They've cycled through a couple different weekday nannies since I've been with them. There is only one monitor. It's in the little dude's room. Once the mom showed me on the camera why they let one go. Little dude said mommy said I don't have to do that. And the nanny snapped back, well, it doesn't matter. Mommy is a witch, and then dragged the kid out of the room by his shirt. Super fired. For your information, they only showed you footage from the decoy camera. Story 5. Not a nanny cam because this happened in the 90s, and I don't think we had them in Scotland then, but my mom came home early one day because she had become suspicious of our nanny. As my sister and I never slept after a day with her, she found both my sister and I in bed in the middle of the day. Turned out our nanny had been dosing us up with child medicine to make us sleep all day so she could sit and do nothing. This happened at my friend's child daycare center. They were giving them Benadryl or something, pill form, and the kids were sleeping all day. My friend had chosen a daycare rather than a babysitter because she thought it'd be safer. Story 6. My mom put a nanny cam in my sister's bedroom. The only disturbing thing my mom allegedly saw was the babysitter crying while holding my sister. Turns out the babysitter just had a miscarriage the day before. Oof, that will rip your heart out. Story 7. Well, a case which happened near where I live. Woman used to work. Husband was out of the country. They had a 2-year-old kid. They hired a nanny to look after him. During the daytime, day by day, kid started looking malnourished, so she set up a spy cam. Apparently the lady used to bring her kid and fed him all the food she was left to feed the one she was watching. Then she would feed the kid cheap biscuits. She was promptly handed over to the police. That also happened to my uncle. The babysitter was stealing formula for her own child and giving him watered down formula. My uncle got sicker and sicker. They fired the babysitter, but he eventually passed away. Story 8. I have a camera to check in on my rabbit when I'm not there. The biggest surprises were how just about everybody never followed my pet sitting instructions. The one exception, ironically, was my brother, who claimed to hate the rabbit and always wanted to get rid of it. I got an alert one day that my camera had detected movement while my brother was there taking care of him, and I decided to take a peek. I opened the app connected to the camera and seen my little brother walk into the room, lay on the floor, and start playing with my rabbit. It warmed my heart. I guess the first rule of siblings is don't let other siblings know you love them or their pets. Story 9. A friend caught his nanny hitting their kid for interrupting the day's binge of watching the TV show Friends and Quat. I hope the cops were called. Story 10. Not me, but my aunt's friend set up a nanny cam because she noticed that every time she changed her child's diaper, the child would start crying a lot more than usual. Turns out when they watched the nanny change her diaper, she would use Clorox wipes if they were nearby, instead of grabbing the baby wipes. WTF. Story 11. My mom suspected the maid of stealing the silverware. She was also just really nosy. However, as it turns out after checking the cam, the maid not only was stealing the silverware but also having some fun with dad. If watching adult movies taught me anything, its dad was just punishing her for stealing. Story 12. I travel the US for work, and I am fortunate enough to be able to bring my 2 beagles with me. They've never been away from my side longer than the time I've been at work. They are 10 and 13. I have a camera that I use to check in on them sometimes, mostly because my larger beagle is quite the ingenious guy, opening doors, scooting chairs over to places so he can jump up onto the counter, etc. Last year, I was in Oregon and had to go home to Michigan for an emergency. I do not fly with them. I will only drive, so I was in a pickle and reluctantly hired someone off of Rover that was willing to come stay over at my hotel room for 3 days. She was great, kept up on texting me about the dogs, said things like tossing them a ball right now, so I checked in the cam when I thought it was appropriate. This woman was amazing. Not only was she playing with them enough for them to tire out, but she was even teaching them new tricks, making them use their brains to solve puzzles, and even got my 42-pound beagle to get up on her back so that she could do push-ups. She was an avid CrossFitter. I was extremely happy. What the F? This is wholesome. Something isn't right here. Story 13. We once caught the nanny feeding them charcoal as a snack. This woman claimed that she thought it was a snack. It was in a charcoal box. My brothers were 4 and 5 years old. She claimed babies can have a little charcoal as a snack. Not even sure she was all there in the head. Story 14. My family paid a nanny cam and a nanny to dog sit for us as we like to go on vacation twice a year. It's one of those cams where they can hear us and we thought it would be great. Once we checked the cam and seen the nanny there 30 minutes early just so she can pet them and play with them. She's sadly retired from working entirely. However, she was the sweetest old lady and we love her. Another time, my dad accidentally left a wad of cash on top of the washer machine, around $600, and she put a rubber band around it and had a note on it saying he misplaced it. Story 15. We have a camera in my other bedroom that is only used for my free roam bunny. We put it in there for when we are at work or if we go on holiday or whatever else. Well, my dad is a big tough guy in quad, who likes to act like he don't like pets, and as it turns out, one day while I was out, he went into the room, crouched down, and was calling the bunny over to him, and he was in there for over an hour, trying to pet the rabbit, and kept repeating in a soft voice, "I'm not gonna hurt you, I just wanna pet you and see how fluffy you are," in quad. He just about crapped himself when I spoke through the cam and said, "She's very fluffy." I'd definitely crap my pants if I was a tough guy caught trying to pet a bun. Story 16. Chasing my cats around with a broom, hitting them. She since had been fired from a cannon, I hope. Story 17. My grandpa was living with us at the time. My parents still decided to hire a regular babysitter to watch the younger kids as they didn't think my grandpa was up for the task. They were out of town for a wedding and decided to stay in a hotel nearby. They had nanny cams set up in a couple rooms. Kids' bedroom, master bedroom, living room, and kitchen, all of them being motion activated. Normally they wouldn't even bother looking through the footage if everything seemed fine upon returning home. Their master bedroom camera had never been triggered before. However, when returning they noticed the master bedroom camera was in fact triggered, so naturally decided to take a look. Cut to my grandpa and the sitter both completely naked making out from the door of the bedroom, slowly making their way over to my parents' bed, where they proceeded to bang for 20 minutes. My grandpa was about 68 years old, the sitter being around 20. My dad called me immediately, laughing hysterically after viewing the footage. I could hear my mom crying in the background, completely mortified, shouting at my dad to kick grandpa out and to throw out the sheets. She then called the sitter and confronted her. The sitter just claimed they had some kind of connection or some crap to that matter. When grandpa was asked about it, he just laughed and said, "At my age you must seize every opportunity," in quad. I truly wish there was audio of the build-up. I lay awake at night sometimes just wondering what kind of game my grandpa was talking to manage to pull a 20-year-old and get in her pants like that. Grandpa is legendary. I hope I am healthy enough when I'm his age to do what he does. Lol. Story 18. I was the kiddo. My mom often tells the story of how she watched me give a big ol' hug to my babysitter who just broke down out of nowhere after serving me lunch. Turns out her dad just had died a month ago, and it just wasn't a good day for her. I still remember you, Miss Yancey. I hope you are doing just fine now. Story 19. The couple I babysat for had a nanny cam in their living room, the kind that went in teddy bears. They got my on camera giving their 2-year-old the Heimlich after he tried to eat a rock. Story 20. I pay for my neighbor to feed the stray cats in my garden when I'm away for days at a time. Well, the camera caught the neighbor trying to come in by bamboo pole vaulting one time. Amazingly, he nailed it. Story 21. Once at the very last moment when no other babysitter was available, I hired one that was notorious for not being good. Not dangerous or anything like leaving the child unattended, but like the type that she would not console the child if they were crying and punish them for doing small things. I was very suspicious, so I was continuously glancing at the baby cam. This babysitter was sitting with him, playing with him and singing songs, reading to him and completely acting in a way you wouldn't expect a bad babysitter to act. Basically what happened was this babysitter got hired before by a crazy parent who didn't like her at all, so they spread a bunch of mumbo jumbo through the neighborhoods. When I came home I gave her a very large tip, and she was the one I always hired whenever I needed a babysitter. That should be some kind of crime, as rumors can truly damage someone's life. Luckily I was put in a position to have to give her a chance. No regrets. Story 22. My parents got a few cams and placed them around the house. The main reason was because our grandpa had home healths come by to take care of him when they were at work or out of the house. My grandpa started going crazy, they told my mom. My grandpa started talking about how his wallet keeps disappearing and he is losing money, along with other things like the remote. This seemed like normal behavior. However, one day my mom's jewelry collection started to dwindle down, little pieces of jewelry here and there. Turns out grandpa wasn't taking his meds as he was supposed to and somehow was telling truth about the home health aide stealing things from the home. My mom found one of the women sneaking into the bedroom and putting a necklace in her pocket. Little did she know that necklace was a one of a kind, even had engraving on the inside of it. There was no excuse on getting out of this one. Story 23. Once when my cousin needed a babysitter, she hired a woman who everyone in the neighborhood seemed to like and trusted to watch their children. So she didn't think she would need a baby camera, so she never set one up. Well, about a few weeks into this woman watching the child from time to time, The child had to be taken to the doctor's office for small strange-looking red dots on the child's stomach. A little investigating and a camera was then set up. Later that month she watched the child a few more times, and the sitter would do things like poke the child in the stomach with a needle, or rock her crib very violently and incredibly hard just to torment her. Police were called, she got confronted and was ultimately arrested. Story 24. I, female 24, was a babysitter for a couple of parents with 2 kids, both males, 8 and 10. While the mom was at work, the dad was a truck driver, so wasn't really home much. The parents were both younger, in their early 30 to almost 40. So I figured this would be fine as they could relate to me more as they were younger. I was always good with kids. These kids, however, were exceptionally bad. Sometimes would do things like heat up a fork on the stove in the open flame just to place it on the older brother, basically branding him with a red hot fork, then chase me around the house trying to get me with it. This is just one example. Of course I watch them like a hawk, however, one distracts you and the other does what they want. It's not always an easy task. Anyways, they paid really well knowing about the behavior, and I didn't want to give up on these kids, so I basically dealt with it until last week. This was my last straw, as the parents set up cameras not to catch me doing anything but to make sure that I wasn't lying about how they would treat me and how they'd behave, as if I was making it all up. Of course this time the boys seemed well behaved, almost like they all rehearsed this and planned it all out. I knew I wasn't going crazy, however they pulled me aside and told me they will no longer be paying me as much due to their children not acting how I always describe. This just so happened to be when the father of the 2 boys was home. Makes sense now, since someone strict is in the house they are acting different. I decided to talk with the dad before leaving, and he basically threw himself at me saying how he wanted me to complete his fantasy of doing some things with the babysitter. I can smell the alcohol on his breath, and before I could walk away or turn around he leaned in and kissed me right on the mouth. I ended up quickly going home not knowing what to do. The next week I get a call and it's the mother of the 2 boys, super upset. Turns out the cameras were still on. Caught everything. Looking back I should have said something, but I was so upset I didn't know what to say. Either way, I am not going back there again.